Hey there, welcome to another stream of RocketMSP. I'm Steve Taylor, your host. Today I am joined by Jeremy Oakes. Jeremy, welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, Jeremy, you are with Automation Theory. You guys can check out automationtheory.org to learn more about the company. But today, my goal is to learn more about what automation theory is, does, and specifically this proxy that you guys have for ConnectWise products.
Yeah, yeah,
So why don't you tell me a little bit about automation theory and maybe your background of what made you start up automation theory?
yeah, absolutely. Well, my story begins working for an MSP. Right out of college, I went to school for computer science, and right out of college, I got hired into the MSP world. I had a knack for coding and scripting, as you might guess, and I soon became the Automate administrator, and then I became the only Automate administrator for about at the time it was 8,000 endpoints, and that grew to 10,000 plus endpoints during my tenure there. And I inherited a sick Automate server. It wasn't running well, and as an organization, we were gearing up for things like SOC 2 compliance and penetration tests and all that. And so we were having discussions about how do you secure a ConnectWise Automate stack? How do you keep this thing running, and also maintain all the business goals along with that? So uh, it I realized that every other MSP at that size and at various other sizes, they have the exact same problems. And well, uh, it'd be nice if somebody actually brought solutions to market for this. And that's where automation theory was born. And as I say, the rest is history.
All right. So, for those of you that have questions that are watching us live, feel free to pop them into the chat. Happy to answer those. Um, so let's talk about what exactly automation theory does for ConnectWise.
Yeah, we are an infrastructure consulting firm, or as I like to say, oil changes entire rotations for your Automate server. And that's one side of the org, and then the other side of the shop is body armor for your MSP. And so we steer clear of anything that'd be uh, virtual administration type consulting. There are a lot of other consulting firms that will help you kind of build out your tooling and help you build scripts and searches and automations and actually making the tool work. But we are the only firm focused specifically on keeping it running and keeping it secured.
All right. So I think you said ConnectWise Automate is what you
Mm-hmm.
focus on. Is
Correct.
that the RMM tool?
Yep.
Okay. It's so confusing for me because they've got manage and they've got automate, and I feel like manage you want to manage the endpoints, and automate you want to professional services automation PSA. So I
Mm-hmm.
always get their stupid software mixed up. Um, all right, so you guys basically protect the RMM, the ConnectWise RMM, and I
Mm-hmm.
I just want to be clear that this is for on-prem servers. You can't really do anything for ConnectWise hosted stuff, right?
Correct.
Okay. Is on-prem still a thing?
It
Like
is.
for as
Uh,
much money as they charge, just let them deal with it.
Well, you might actually be better off running your own server. That might be a different podcast episode, but uh, yeah, there are a lot of advantages to running your server on prem. Uh, Performance, security, along with the ability to do various integrations and all that. So
Okay. All right. So let's see here. Reverse proxy. What
mhm.
is it? Because I know what a proxy is. a reverse proxy? Is it just backwards?
Basically. A normal proxy is for outbound internet traffic, and
Hmm.
you use that for content filtering, things like that. You've got a school computer lab, and you want to make sure the kids are staying away from certain sites or can only access XYZ educational resources. So you'd configure your proxy server to process those outbound requests. And reverse proxy, well, it's the opposite. You have a server that you want to protect, so you put a proxy in front of it, and the internet talks to the proxy, and not to your actual server directly.
So when we have a reverse proxy, when it doesn't really do us any good unless we are telling the agents for the RMM that they need to talk to the proxy instead of directly to our server then.
Correct. You'd need to move your agent traffic, your optionally your technician traffic, and all of your various integrations. But don't worry, it's actually easier than that sounds.
Okay, that's good because for those of you that don't know this, I'm lazy. So if it's a lot of work, I don't want to do it. All right,
Yeah,
so why don't you? I know you've got some slides. Um, and as boring as that sounds, everybody, I think I need some slides to understand this a little better. So let's go through this and figure some things out here.
yeah. So with the introductions out of the way, the one prerequisite before we start to dive into a reverse proxy would be a little bit of a overview of why the business case for this type of technology and all of that. So historically, as bad actors have been attacking MSPs, uh, it was different in the past. And before, it was normally based around just poor fundamentals. You either had weak credentials, there was a lack of MFA, or there was a poor security configuration, like the admin forgot to set up like account lockouts or something like that, and people were able to brute force into your RMM tools and then use it to deploy malicious software. And good fundamentals are still important, but the modern attack patterns are shifting away from vulnerabilities in the actual or to vulnerabilities in the actual software and away from its actual underlying configuration. And Kaseya VSA is a prime example of that. So for years, that guidance to MSPs of good fundamentals was unchanging, and responsible MSPs did just that. They used strong credentials, they enabled MFA, they patched their servers, and thought all was well with the world. But unfortunately, uh, with an application vulnerability, you can do everything right from the fundamentals point of view and still actually get exploited. And that's what happened with Kaseya VSA. You had over 60 MSPs who were ransomed due to application flaws, including an MFA bypass. And so that is, the part of the fundamental why that you'd want to put extra security in front of your RMM. Uh, and one thing we'd like to note is that, as you can see on the slide here, the Kaseya attack could have been a lot worse. To this day, well, as of yesterday, actually, grab that search data there. There are over 800 Kaseya VSA servers still hooked directly to the internet. So uh, this is something that our industry still struggles with. And these underlying techniques of zero-day exploits against the application are just going to continue to rise.
Okay. But that's Kaseya VSA. I mean, obviously they have exploits because they've got a lot of tech debt. ConnectWise, I mean, they're just a fantastic company without any issues, right? So we don't need this stuff.
Well, uh, it's one of those things where you can say what you want about ConnectWise, but every piece of software has a bug, and we see that all the time, right? Microsoft is releasing patches monthly, and if we compare ConnectWise against Microsoft, I would say that Microsoft is better in terms of just pipelines. Like, they've been building like operating systems and very large, complex pieces of software that are much larger than a single RMM. And if they're still patching vulnerabilities monthly, then I would say that this is just going to be universal. That the software will have vulnerabilities, and we've in the past made reference to things that have been found by people out in the community. There have been in the past SQL injections found for Automate, XXE vulnerabilities, which is where you have an external XML inclusion that basically it let you execute arbitrary code against a ConnectWise Automate instance, and just lots of other things like that. So, tech debt aside, all that aside, we need to have the conversation around business risk. What would happen if your MSP was hit by ransomware? We have, everybody is concerned about this, and there are different solutions for different parts. And lots of people are willing to sell MSPs all sorts of, pay-per-seat widgets to guard against ransomware for their clients. But you don't have a lot of actual products that are for the MSP to protect their tool stack.
Okay. So this slide looks like basically it's what you told us. You've got the internet. It's going to the proxy first before it touches our ConnectWise server.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. So, we already made mention of this. Like, this is the nice, easy way to visualize this diagram at the end of the slide deck. You'll see a little infrastructure of how we tie everything in, and how those requests look as we go through some of the crunchier technical slides coming up, complete with fun attack examples. But before we get there, there is a little middle piece that is worth noting, and that is how an attack works. And, back to our favorite case study, Kaseya VSA. We're defending against attacks, and they have phases. And as you can see, color-coded on the slide, they typically go in a very similar order. So you have your reconnaissance, and that's where an attacker finds your server. And the next slides are gonna cover examples of this and all that, and we can do the deeper dive in the following slides. But if we're able to fingerprint from afar the technology stack, that makes it child's play to locate these servers, to attack them once you have the vulnerability, which brings us to the weaponization.
So hold on. How do they actually figure out? Oh, hey, Steve's got a ConnectWise server over here on XIP, because I don't know the combination, but aren't there like billions of IPs and URLs and all that? Like, how do they know that this particular one is a ConnectWise server?
Yeah, well, there are a few ways to figure it out, and we our service, which we'll get to all the particulars of that. We have security layers to protect against all of them, but IoT scanners. If I click back a couple slides here, so Kaseya VSA. This screenshot is from Shodan, And so Shodan just crawls the internet and tries to connect to each IP, and these servers sent back data. And so you can see there that that's an HTTP 200 OK code. So like that server accepted that request, and it spit back that it was a Kaseya server. And I actually borrowed the search filter for this from the DIVD. They are the Dutch Institute for Vulnerability Disclosure. They had published a report after the Kaseya VSA attack, and this search is based on that little favorite icon. If you see that little blue K next to that, that's a file that the web server sends, and it has a hash, and you can search Shodan for those hashes. And you can, with a paid account, you can filter Shodan by a lot of other data. And so we can get into some of that in the live demo after the slide deck here. But yeah, somebody else has done all the hard part of searching the internet and finding all this. So I, as the bad guy, just need to know what to search for. And the bad guys who would be systematically attacking RMMs are probably going to have no problem figuring out the search terms and constructing such an attack.
Got it. Okay.
So once we get to reconnaissance, we get to weaponization. And that is basically where you pair up a vulnerability with a known exploit. So they've discovered, oh, hey, we can SQL inject the server, we can MFA bypass, or we can do X, Y, or Z. Now they just need to write some code to do it. And then you come to delivery, where they send that code to your server. And then exploitation happens. Once the code hits the server, the code runs, and then you are exploited. And then everything else after that happens on the server side. So all of your EDR, all of your SIM, all of that, that happens from installation to command and control to actions on objective. So everything that we sell with our proxy service and its WAF add-on happens before that hits your server.
Okay. Cool.
And so let's talk a little bit more about reconnaissance. So screenshot on the top of the slide here. This is an Nmap scan of an Automate server. And this is very similar to how Shodan operates. It scans the internet by IPs and it pulls this data back in. And by scanning that server, I can figure out that this is a server running IIS, and it's running on Windows Server 2012. And that's, if I'm attacking, that's useful information. I can start to ask questions like, are there any vulnerabilities in that operating system? What about IIS? Are there any framework problems? Things like that. And it can be very easy to start to pair known vulnerabilities with this version information and start to form an attack. And some of this, you're facing two different opponents here. There is the dumb bot attack, and then there is the targeted attack. Just like you have normal spam email, and then you have spear phishing. And so both are threats that you'd want to protect against. And so as you can see here, direct communication, server spill nuts guts. We know what it is and what it's about. But what if we proxy it? Well, that's a good question. So instead of seeing an Automate server, well, now it sees a proxy. And it's obvious that this is a proxy running on a different operating system. But I don't know what that underlying technology is. So if I'm trying to go after a Windows vulnerability, if I'm trying to go after let's say that there's a 0-day in Microsoft IIS. And while that some people might think that sounds a little far-fetched, if you think back to Exchange proxy login, well, there was a RCE for every on-premise Exchange server in the world. And so hopefully that never happens. I don't want that to happen, but it is feasible that there's a vulnerability discovered, and well, people go to Shodan and start attacking servers. So on that surface level, just proxying can help you avoid attacks like that. If I were looking for Automate servers and I saw something like this, I wouldn't think that this is an attack target, but there's a little more to it than that. And proxy, the nice part about proxy is that it goes from the network layer all the way up to layer 7. And that is what we have coming up next. So these are screenshots out of a IoT tool. And the screenshot on the right, this is an actual automation theory reverse proxy client. And on the left, you have the first Automate server I found. And this is the difference at layer 7 and kind of shows how we keep an Automate server out of Shodan. We can configure the proxy when inbound requests come in to only pass the traffic back if it meets certain checks, including the FQDN. So here, the IoT scanner was scanning the internet by IP. The plain IIS server didn't bat an eyelid. It just responded, and you can see all the server headers and versions and all that, and it's redirecting to the WCCQ splash page for Automate. And on the right, the proxy said that's not a valid request, and it responds with a 503 code that there's no service available here. And it didn't include any actual details about, oh yeah, this is an IIS version, or this is an Automate server, or anything like that. And that just keeps you out of these scanners. And in a world where vulnerabilities are sold and then mass exploited, keeping your systems out of these IoT scanners is increasingly important.
Okay, so if I'm understanding correctly, and I'm sorry, I'm not as technical as I used to be, and maybe that's just the imposter syndrome talking, right? But okay, so we've got a proxy, and now it's just saying, "Hey, I'm a proxy," instead of "Hey, I'm a ConnectWise server." Can't we still like see what happens and start trying to do some exploit stuff?
You can, and that actually ties into our next couple slides here, and there are a few different things that we can do to prevent that and to mitigate for that when that does happen, because there's no such thing as a silver bullet in IT security. So first things first.
There will be when I'm done with it.
You let me know about that. But here, this is a screenshot of Metasploit, the well-known hacking framework, ships with Kali Linux, and we move into the weaponization phase of an attack as we talk about this, where we're just trying to pair up, hey, what's a code to attack this vulnerability? And the first part of this, as far as weaponization goes, is just seeing, can we pull a fast one on the attack framework? And here, we've configured both the local IP and the proxy IP of the same Automate server, and we asked the Kali or the Metasploit module to check, hey, are these vulnerable? And the local IP communicating straight with the server, you can see, is vulnerable, and then it said the proxy is not exploitable. And so if you are a targeted attacker and you're using tools like this, well, this might be a little bit of a sleight of hand. But uh, if you don't know the full details, if you are doing a black box attack against an organization, you might not pursue this. But to your point, you could still try and exploit this. And certain attacks will, be stopped when it sees, oh, hey, this isn't a compatible, web server or anything like that. But certain attacks, especially against the application layer, will pass through. And that's where a WAF comes in, because a WAF is scanning at the application layer. And we'll go ahead and we'll later in the deck, we'll do some due diligence to WAFs. But there's also another important option that we can do when we want to reduce attack surface to minimize the ability of bad actors to go ahead and actually try attacks. And that's where we get into delivery. And the proxy service does two things in this regard. The first one is going to be GeoIP. And GeoIP, it's a very familiar technology, and it's rather humble, but it still has its place, especially against just bot-based attacks. If you have, there was a vulnerability against ConnectWise Automate known as Enraged Duck, and that's the name perch assigned to it. And there was a bad actor who was downloading installers off of ConnectWise Automate, and they were doing so from Russia. So obviously they didn't have any problem finding these Automate servers. And then they were downloading the Linux installer, which contained the server password. That vulnerability has been patched many years back at this point, is no longer a concern. But the big question is, why was your Automate server accessible from Russia, especially if you don't have clients over there? And I don't know a lot of people who do. And, well, it's just a basic fundamental oversight. Nobody years ago was preaching to MSPs, GeoIP lock everything. And so, well, by and large, that guidance, while it's, obvious to anybody who thinks about it, nobody was thinking about it. And so we bolt that into our service along with ACLs, or access control lists, which are something that we can customize to your specific business needs. And, we'll get to all the things that we include with our service. But here on screen, we have something that we actually helped the client with. So this is an Automate server. And as you can see, the UI is accessible from the United States, from California. And
I'm still seeing the slide deck.
Yes. Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
So, talking about the screenshot on the slide. Sorry. So you can see that from California and Virginia, we were able to connect to the Automate server. You see in the upper left there that Singapore has a 403 error message, and this was an agent-only ACL. They had a client in Singapore, and they needed those remote agents to communicate, but they didn't want anybody outside the US to be able to access the UI for Automate. And so you can see it's connecting, but not to that part of the application. The ACL was blocking that. Then anything outside of GeoIP scope, like Brazil, Ireland, or Australia, they didn't have any clients, and so the proxy doesn't even let them connect if you're outside of GeoIP scope. And so between the two, this client has greatly reduced their attack surface. Instead of being open to the world, they're open to the United States, plus a handful of countries they do business in, and you can only access Automate from inside the US. So you can still try and maneuver around certain controls, but that's where we bring in something like a WAF.
Got it. Okay. Well, this this looks good. I mean, all right, so you're preventing basically people from other countries from being able to see the system. I mean, I feel like I could do that with Cloudflare though, right?
You,
I
you
got the Cloudflare firewall. I can geo target the, you know.
you sure could try. One thing that we glazed over, because I wasn't gonna pick on them too much. But if we jump back to our friends Kaseya VSA, it's very small on the screen under that second listing. Did you see where it says Cloudflare? That server, somebody thought they were going to be smart and tuck it in behind Cloudflare. Well, they did, but we still found it.
Hmm.
And so uh, this really comes down to how you implement these sorts of solutions and technologies. Can you do it the right way? Absolutely. There are some unique challenges in regards to ConnectWise Automate, and that basically there's a community guide out there in the MSP Geek world for how to Cloudflare your Automate server, and it's better than nothing. I will give it that. You're either, when you implement that, you're either sacrificing Heartbeat, which is used for agent offline monitoring, or SSO. So if you're an organization that has stood up your Automate server as ConnectWise advises, and they really like people to use their SSO, I'm not going to comment on that. But if you did that, then you're really stuck in a rock and a hard place about how can we protect our application stack while keeping it secure, or while keeping the functionality there. And that's where a purpose designed service can be more useful to you. The other thing I'd note, which is coming up later in the slide deck, is that we're experts in the back end application. So if you call us up and say, hey, my computer screen doesn't work, well, we know exactly what that part of the application is, and we can start to corroborate your symptoms into probable causes inside the security stack and troubleshoot and diagnose with you very quickly. Whereas your third-party application vendor or WAF vendor doesn't know a heck of a lot about your application, and the support that they're going to be able to offer to you is going to be a lot different.
All right.
So, with that, before we talk about a WAF, we have one bonus slide for you.
Okay.
And that is TLS hardening. As we were kind of cherry picking from our various past presentations, I wanted to toss this in here as a function, a security function of the reverse proxy. And in a nutshell, TLS hardening is the process of locking down the versions of HTTPS that your Automate server is using. We've done some other industry research, and actually 89% of Automate servers are listening on plain old HTTP, which is a separate problem for a separate day. But you still have a lot of MSPs out there with their servers listening on older versions of TLS. And sometimes that's for compatibility reasons, like you have a client who still has Windows XP or old Server 2008 versions of Windows Server that won't support TLS 1.2, things like that. Well, with the proxy service, we're able to go ahead and really harden those ciphers and apply some other best practices pretty easily that will greatly increase the security around the cryptography component of an Automate server. And we're also able to elegantly configure it for version fallback. And so if you do have XP or Server 2003 or unpatched Server 2008 or Windows 7 boxes, you're taking over a client and, well, they were really behind and these systems don't speak the most secure versions of TLS 1.2, you can add a fallback in your agent template for all the way back to TLS 1.0. And as you guessed, you can apply an ACL to it, so only agents can communicate on those older ciphers. And that makes sure that if you're a technician or something like that, you are always connecting through the browser to the latest and greatest versions of TLS. But if you have a legacy device, we can seamlessly let that communicate, but ensure that nothing else can try and do any cryptography-based attacks against your staff.
All right. What else you got for us, my friend?
All right, so that was all the foundation of a reverse proxy. Couple more slides, and then it's demo time. So a WAF is our next topic, and this is an add-on that we sell along with our proxy, and it's essentially deep inspection for that inbound traffic. So let's say that there was an attacker in North America and they found your Automate server, even though you have it proxied, and they want to attack you. Well, this is the next line of defense. A WAF is going to look at all parts of that request going into the server, from the headers to the cookies to the payload, and is looking for things like protocol anomalies, malicious user agents such as known bots, exploit tools, things like that. And it's also looking for web attacks proper, whether that's injection, file inclusion, cross-site scripting, or anything else that you'd find in the OWASP top 10 list. And every single request is receiving those checks. And so even if somebody can maneuver around your security controls, they're in Russia, but they spin up an AWS server here in the US, and they're trying to launch an attack from there. Or even if you've done IP whitelisting and they've managed to wiggle in behind an IP that is on your safe list, well, the WAF is still going to be looking for those attacks. And it picks up right where the proxy leaves off.
Okay. So doesn't Cloudflare have a WAF too?
It does. But again, your mileage may vary.
And to clarify, I'm not saying that it's easy to set up. I'm saying they have one. So let me ask this question a little bit differently. If you were to configure Cloudflare's WAF and proxy, would you be able to make it function just as well as you've figured out how to make the automation theory reverse proxy function?
Not entirely, unless you want to pay $2,000 a month for an enterprise plan. If you want to shell out the cash, we can make anything work.
And why is that? Is it just because they lock everything behind a paywall?
For custom ports and UDP traffic, yes.
Okay.
That's really where the rub comes in. So there are some nuances to how WAFs work. If you're not an integration company with dedicated logging and analytics across a tool stack like this, you're probably not going to get as secure of a WAF implementation, which we can chase that rabbit a little bit when we talk about what's included in our service. But Automate has about, we're actually in the middle of writing a blog post about the different network components and what your firewall should look like, in the ports and protocols and risks involved therein. But there are 6 different pieces of ConnectWise Automate that all talk to each other. And and they use different ports for some of that. And so you'd start to sacrifice certain things as far as functionality goes that would require custom ports or UDP traffic support or things like that that will move you into something that's going to cost about 10 times as much as our solution. And you're back to support can help you build your widget in Cloudflare. But when your application doesn't work like the way you want it to, or you apply the latest Automate patch and all of a sudden something breaks, their ability to help you troubleshoot is going to be a lot different.
Okay.
So,
And I'm just trying to play devil's advocate here. I'm I'm not I'm not trying to poo-poo your product. I just know that you probably get this question a lot.
yes. Oh, definitely. And like there are people who want to do it themselves, and we'll talk about that a little bit when we get to live demo mode and we bust out Shodan and all that.
Mhm.
But yes, this is a very common question, and I do appreciate the call out there, because some of that isn't necessarily obvious as you're kicking tires and comparing products and doing evaluations of vendors and all that. So
Mhm. All right.
with that, let's talk about a WAF and plain old Automate servers. So this is what we have here in the slide deck. This is a request with the user agent set to be an Nmap scanner. User agent is just a little bit that a request sends to the server. It's how when you pull up a website on desktop versus mobile, it knows what format to send you based on the user agent of the device you're using. And so we send a request to the Automate server pretending we're Nmap, and in this direct request, the server replies back, 200 OK, and sends us back HTML data. It's redirecting us and all of that. And well, from a security perspective, you don't want your server to be talking to scanners.
Sure.
And here, we make that same request through a reverse proxy with WAF configured. And the WAF spotted that request, and it responded with a 403 code, and it didn't spill the guts of the end server. It didn't try to redirect you anywhere, anything like that. Just straight old access denied. And this is a basic example, but it does a great job of demonstrating the functionality of a WAF and how it can, block known bad delivery methods and suspicious requests. And it can also do the same thing for exploits. So here, this is a normal Automate agent communication. It is pretty crunchy. It's all, just server agent kind of behind the scenes traffic going back and forth. And in the little red highlighted area, we added some malicious SQL to it. And we sent that to the server, and it replied back, 200 OK. Server essentially didn't bat an eyelid at this malformed request. And the agent traffic of your RMM, this is something that still needs to be open to the world. You can lock down everything, but those remote agents for the product to work as advertised need to communicate with the RMM server. And so this attacks against the agent traffic we predict are going to increase as MSPs, harden their server and put other defenses in place. But
Okay.
let's see what happens with a WAF. So as you can see here, the WAF really shines. It saw the SQL in that payload, and it matched it up against SQL injection rules and blocked it in quick 226 milliseconds. And the protections of the WAF, they're going to apply across the whole application, everything from the APIs to the control center, the web UIs, the agent communications, and any third-party additional integrations you have. And that makes it an extremely valuable security layer. So,
very cool. Okay, I'm still with you.
all right. So, just a quick review of how we stack all these different layers together before we bust out the live demos and go hunting and Shodan and all that. We have a little comparison spread here. So a plain reverse proxy conceals your end server. So if you're a DIY MSP and you're like, I want to roll my own, a reverse proxy is going to get you that concealment layer and hopefully protect against reconnaissance. Doesn't always work as advertised. We'll see that. Here at Automation Theory, with our service, we bake in a whole bunch of value adds as far as preventing enumeration, the hardening, the access control lists, and the proxy can also block some basic attacks like you saw with the Metasploit. When you bolt on the WAF, it can block more advanced attacks like you saw with the SQL injection. The agent traffic, it'll validate the protocols, and it will also go ahead and do some exploit blocking. I'm sorry, the attack tools, that was Nmap, and the exploit blocking was the SQL injection. So that's where all the layers kind of come into place. We oftentimes sell the proxy and WAF as a straight package, and so for anybody who's just wanting to learn more and explore these types of security devices, that's how it all shakes out.
Cool.
All right. Well, beyond that, we've pretty much through our conversation covered the additional of what our service offerings look like. It is worth a quick mention that this is drop-in. You can get a hold of us. We can spin you up a proxy, attach a WAF to it, and you can run that in parallel with your current environment as you're testing and evaluating and things like that. The implementation is designed to be very easy. You update a template, you swap out a URL, and you can get up and running with it. And we're there to go ahead and answer questions and step you through various things if you get stuck. It's a fully managed service. We take care of all the back end of making sure that your proxy stays patched, that your WAF rules are up to date, that any false positives are taken care of. And, we've designed it for the ConnectWise tool stack. We've talked about ConnectWise Automate. We can also tuck in ConnectWise Control behind the same proxy. There's no additional cost for that. You just tell us, hey, you want to add control. We'll get your server information plummeted in for you. And we have a couple different common deployment models that we can walk you through depending on your particular stack. And these are dedicated proxy instances. You will get a static IP or multiple static IPs if you cluster your proxies, and those are yours. So, and then the WAF, that's just transparent inline, again, designed for MSPs running this software, and the rules are very granular, and that's the other thing when we talk about Cloudflare or rolling your own versus a service. There's a community guide out there for building a WAF out in Azure, and there are certain rule IDs that are turned off, and those rule IDs happen to be things like SQL injection and shellcode. And those can be really tricky because Automate has a lot of SQL. It's actually a feature. You can write custom SQL queries, so you don't want your WAF to block that. But at the same time, if I'm a bad actor and I have found a chink in the application armor and I have a malicious SQL query, you do want that blocked. And so since we have the back end infrastructure built out for it, each time that there's a blocked request, that gets aggregated for us, and we're able to go through and see, oh, hey, this rule triggered for this part of the application and this was the subsection of that request. And so instead of disabling SQL injection across the board, we can disable SQL injection for this screen with this filter. And so, a common example of this in the web UI for Automate, you can filter by various things, and those filters will trip SQL injection rules. And so, if you're using a third party that doesn't give you granular access, or if you don't have the time or resources to dig into, hey, what part of this actually failed, and part of that is getting the logging data off the WAF, which isn't available with every service out there, you have to disable those rules wholesale. And so we're able to give you something very granular, because otherwise you end up with a Swiss cheese WAF. If you disable SQL injection for Automate, where the in the last few years, at least once a year, there has been a SQL injection vulnerability patched in that app. So if you disable those rules, well, you might as well not have one of these. So, and we've covered all these benefits. It's worth a call out that we are a ConnectWise certified integrator, and so we have a bat phone to ConnectWise development, and we can get requests to development faster than most partners can get regular support. So, in the event there ever was an upstream issue, we can act very quickly and get that resolved. And you as the MSP won't be on your own trying to figure out what's wrong, what happened in this latest patch, etc., etc. And we do also have a self-service API. So if you opt for a deployment model where you have some trusted IP addresses, you want to make sure that in the event of a false positive, your office IP doesn't get blocked or anything like that. Well, we have an API, and you can pop in your list of IP addresses and self-service, all of that. We also have some common diagnostics built in. So if you're trying to figure out, hey, this new client isn't communicating correctly with the proxy, you have a whole suite of tools that you can use to spot check your proxy status, communication with that other device, and you can typically resolve any common issue you'd have without needing to leverage our support. So,
okay.
And with that, the last slide in the deck. This is basically how it looks over the internet. Everything hits the proxy. The proxy, if you have the WAF add-on, will send the traffic to the WAF and ask the WAF what it thinks. WAF responds back with a score, not like a spam filter, and the proxy will either block that traffic or let it through to your Automate server.
Well, let's see it, man.
All right.
How do you demo a proxy?
I'll show you.
Okay.
Let me turn on my sharing here. Okay. So this is proxydemo.automationtheory.org. And I will actually take this URL and I will copy it out of my other browser, because I have actually prepared for this. And I'll drop it in the chat. And this can be a fun follow along. I'll drop it in that chat if you want to put it out for our audience there. So that URL should only be open to a couple of IPs. If you click on it, assuming my dev lab is configured correctly, you'll probably get an error message. But if you pop in and you go to lab tech agent.aspx, you should go ahead and get a screen that looks like this. Even if you got a 403 error on the first page, that spits back the version number of your Automate server, and this is where your agents check into.
Mm-hmm.
So now, if we go ahead, we have a WAF test rule. So pretty simple, but if you go test WAF equals true, well, voila, 405 method not allowed. So the proxy saw that, it matched against the test rule and blocked it. And to us, it appears almost instantaneous. You have no idea that you are, being scanned by multiple security layers and all of that. And well, if you change that back to false, voila, you are back in. And so it really is unique per request as you are sending that back and forth. And
Interesting.
yeah. And otherwise, there's a whole bunch of we harden HTTP headers. We want to cut down on the boring parts of the slide deck. Not that header security is boring, but it is a little abstract, and that can be a little a little bit less fun, especially. There are some, if you sign up for a trial of our proxy service, we send you 2 reports. First one is going to be a header report from Mozilla Observatory. The second one is going to be a report from SSL HTTPS certificate and ciphers and all of that. And those reports do a great job of breaking down, kind of strengths and weaknesses and what are the gaps in a default configuration. When we hook up a WAF, it blocks those scanners, so I can't actually show you those reports with my my lab environment here. But we can go ahead. I have my server. I actually have one other thing to show you here. So we're going to just do a SQL injection here. So if we were SQL injecting, we're going to escape. We're going to type our SQL query, and then we're going to comment out the rest of the application's SQL. And then actually go ahead and copy this. And then type in a password. You can see, voila, the WAF picked up on that. And it blocked it. Now, if we go to the server directly, shields down, and we type that in, well, we'll hit login, and it says, well, can't find a user. Because this isn't vulnerable to SQL injection, but it sent that to the server processed it, and then replied back to us. And so if there was a vulnerability, that SQL would have executed. And so obviously, back to our conversation about good fundamentals. Yes, you should still have good fundamentals. You should keep your server patched. You should go ahead and make sure your authentication is configured as it ought to be, MFA on everything. All the old advice still does stand. But you don't want to be out in Shodan. And we have a few Shodan tabs out here. This isn't filtered. You have some duplicates because MSPs have both 80 and 443 open. But that 443 number is about correct as far as what we've found in other reporting and automation. So right now, today, there are about 7,700 ConnectWise Automate servers out in the world. And that includes, So we found 600 Kaseya servers, but there are, almost 8,000 ConnectWise Automates out there. So if you think about, well, what's the next attack target? If I'm a bad actor and I have millions of dollars of ransoms that have been paid to me already, and I have time and resources to throw at my next big heist, and I know MSPs are out there, and they already kind of have the attack pattern of the Kaseya attacks. All they need to do is find your vulnerability, and once you're logged in, a basic Shodan account, which is $50, you can download this data and then import it into your little attack bot and go. And that's what we want to prevent with our products and services. I was the RMM admin for an MSP, and this is something I thought about. I walked through my office and all my coworkers and all this, and it's like, so if we get hit by ransomware, what's going to happen to the business? What's going to happen to revenue? What's going to happen to my friends and coworkers who work here? What's going to happen to our local community? Because we did business with people who are local. If I go to the grocery store, are those point of sale machines going to work? Because I shopped somewhere where my MSP was the IT provider, and I go through the checkout line with devices that I used to patch. My remote agents were on all those cash registers, and I knew that I was good to shop there because I knew those were updated on their patching when I was swiping my credit card. Different story. Anyways, so yeah, what's the impact? My favorite thing to do is to work with MSP owners who they built their business from the ground up. They know all their customers, they know the stories, they know the pain points, and they've helped them to implement solutions. And when you have a craftsman business like that, it's just heartbreaking, the thought of, oh yeah, you could potentially have a bad IT incident and certain businesses might not survive. While there are definitely a lot of other resources for kind of post-attack scenarios, I very much would rather put up some body armor in front of your server and prevent such an attack from happening. And moving on to people rolling their own and all of that, you can go ahead and with Shodan, with an account, you can view a report and it'll break it down. There are two things I want to note here. As you look at this product screen, Microsoft IIS, that's what Automate runs on. You then have Nginx. That's a Linux web server. And so there's a community guide out there for how to use Nginx to reverse proxy your Automate server. It's recommended by people in the community. And the thing I want to note about that is that, well, it doesn't work to get you out of Shodan as written. Shodan here has found 10 Automate servers behind Nginx. It's found 3 behind Apache. These were MSPs who kind of rolled their own, and there's some brave soul using a service as CloudFront. So there are people out there, and they have a false sense of security, unfortunately, where they think, oh yeah, we're proxied, we're secure, and if push came to shove, those attacks would go straight through those reverse proxies, and maybe they have a WAF on there, maybe they don't, but that they are still visible, publicly enumerable, and obviously with how the laws are written here in the US, we don't know a lot more about their situation than what we see here. But it is a concern of mine, as there are these community guides. I don't want to it is better than nothing, and I don't want to steer people away from that unnecessarily, but it's not the security protection you think it is. The other thing that I want to call out, Shodan is kind enough to tell us about these vulnerabilities, and this is remote code execution. So and this vulnerability, it dates back to 2015. So there are 11 MSPs out there who are running Automate servers missing Windows Update, and anybody could go out and try to exploit this and run code and break into these MSPs. And that's a scary thought. That in theory, depending on all the particulars of exploiting that vulnerability, in theory, you could have the headline tomorrow, ConnectWise MSPs hacked. And it would, be these 11 IT providers who had their server exposed, were also behind on patching it. And that's a risk we don't want to see anybody take. And that's a headline we'd also like to avoid seeing in the news. And that's why good fundamentals are still important, even if you do add security layers like reverse proxy.
Well, I gotta say, this has been eye-opening. Like I said, I'm not a security professional, so I know I'm missing a bunch of questions. But for those of you that are watching this later on, uh, you know, how can we reach you, Jeremy? We just go to automationtheory.org. Is there a contact form?
Yeah. Up at the top header of the website, you'll see our ticketing email connector, that support at automationtheory.org.
Mhm.
And that will go ahead and get you a ticket. And you can send any general questions, trial requests, things like that. We also have one other link I will pop into chat for you for any ConnectWise MSPs out there. On our website, we have a scanner we put together specifically for ConnectWise Automate servers. And so you can pop your server in there, and it will show you reports. It'll cover some of the things we talked about and some other things that we didn't quite fit in, like open ports or search engine enumerability, things like that. A lot of fun stuff out there. But that will go ahead and give you a report of what needs attention with your Automate server, and it will pre-populate a trial proxy request down below. So if you look at that and you realize, oh, hey, we do have gaps that we'd like to try out a proxy with, well, it should be a click or two from there once you get your results. And otherwise, we are very active in the MSP Geek community. So if anybody is out there, we have our own channel, and that's also a great way to get a hold of us.
Really cool. Now, I gotta say, I gotta beat you up on this a little bit. So, guys, I just need you to go to this mysterious website and punch in your server details, and we swear we're just doing a security scan to show you stuff, not to do nefarious things. Moo ha 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 ha.
Yeah. So there is an FAQ on that page. So we don't store the scan results. That is one thing that is important to us. Yes. Okay.
We don't store. Sorry.
So the only thing, and it says there right on the page, the only thing that we keep around would be the name, email, and server address, just to make sure that no bad actor is using our scanning tool to scan for Automate
Fair.
servers. We want to make sure that the tooling that we have out there isn't being abused. And otherwise, our server scanner is a combination of things that you'd find on SSL Labs and Mozilla Observatory. And, we do a port check for things like, is your MySQL database port open? Automate runs on a MySQL backend. And, well, we've seen MSPs out in Shodan that have their MySQL port open. That used to be a good practice, and now it's not. In our other recorded webinars, I actually, included a stop what you're doing right now and go check that in your firewall, because that is a big attack vector. And the other side of the shop is, patching databases. And we have a webinar out there on if I can get database access and wiggle in, what bad things can I do? And it's a lot. If you like hacking webinars, that's out on our YouTube channel. But yes, the if you feel a little nervous about using our scanner, go use your own scanner. But educate yourself on like what is best practice, and what are the gaps in the standard Automate server, and then what are you going to do about it? There are 8,000 Automate servers out there. There are too many Automate servers for us to be the only vendor for this. Right now, I don't know of anybody else who is offering these same services, but we can't take the whole world as an automation
Right.
theory client. So to that end, uh, yeah, for MSPs who are of the size and scale and scope where it makes sense to try that in house, more power to you. But we work with MSPs of all shapes and sizes, from 1 and 2 man consulting shops all the way up to 20,000 plus endpoints, multiple offices, geographies, time zones, and our primary client base is in the US, but we also have clients in Canada, the UK, Australia, and New Zealand. So basically anywhere that's English speaking and uses ConnectWise software, and even in a few places that don't speak English as well. So
That's really cool, man. Well, hey, Jeremy, I really appreciate you popping on here and educating us about reverse proxy and WAF services. Um, Even if people don't buy your stuff, I feel like I've learned a heck of a lot today on how some of the security stuff works, and I truly thank you for that.
yeah.
But you should totally buy his stuff.
Yeah, well, hey, it's always my pleasure. I'm always happy to talk about this and walk people through it, and heck, there's even more stuff that we didn't cover here. So, uh, you know, uh, anytime anybody has questions, just let us know.
Cool. Thanks, Jeremy, and thank you everyone for watching the latest episode of Rocket MSP. You take care.